Hi all, I have another very interesting example game to show you from Jobava with the Jobava system against Boris Savchenko in the World Blitz Championship of 2014. So d4 from Jobava, we have knight f6, knight c3, d5, bishop f4, and so sometimes this is actually a threat to hit c7. Black extinguishes white's use of the b5 square. After knight f3 plays though now bishop g4, e6 might actually be more solid, as has been seen in a number of high level games, although it hems in the bishop. Black, for example, in Majorov against Anish Giri, played in 2018, saw this with black playing for c5, taking on d4, and actually grabbing after knight e2. White volunteered that bishop, and black was able to do something with the light square bishop pretty soon, bishop d7 to b5, and swap that off, and eventually it was a draw. So it seems a little bit counterintuitive to play e6 because it blocks in the bishop, surely, but maybe it's actually okay in these particular circumstances with the knight on c3 of this particular position. So it's kind of understandable that Boris Savchenko extended his bishop out of the pawn chain. It's kind of common advice: put your bishop out of the pawn chain, don't lock it in, maybe trade it off at some point. But white didn't want to allow bishop takes f3 and actually played knight e5. Now after bishop f5, e3, black actually kind of made things a little bit worse here, e6. So although the bishop is out of the pawn chain, it is actually a tactical liability here in its own right. Perhaps knight bd7 would be safer, because f3 is looking at g4 and h4. So for example, h6, g4, this is actually a small edge for white. And if g4 though, this actually might even press for a larger advantage already. So like this, for example, it looks pretty awkward for the bishop to be on e6. White's definitely getting a nice advantage there. And if knight takes e5, d takes leaves two pieces hanging. So knight takes though, f3, this position, white grabs that nice center pawn and is in a great shape, great position here with a big advantage. So it is actually rather tricky already after e3. So e6 makes things a little bit worse now. This whole bishop issue is really outlined now after g4, bishop g6, and the problem for black is h4, threatening h5 to crunch that bishop. So there's a really big, huge opening advantage now for white in this position. h6 was played. No better is knight bd7. After h5, that just loses a piece basically. Black would have to sacrifice a piece. It's pretty bad being a piece down there. And on bishop e4, then there's the move f3. And if black tries to complicate, in fact, white could leisurely sort of put the pressure before taking on e4 to take e4 under the most comfortable circumstances. And that's a fantastic piece up position for white. So this is a really big problem already now after h4. Black is forced into a major structural concession and losing that bishop. So knight takes g6 was played, bishop d3, and what's going to protect f7 here? The king comes out to play, but the queen now kind of x-rays the king. This is just extremely unpleasant. It's a disaster for black, this opening. Bishop b4 is played. So king g8 is not very palatable after bishop takes g6 and g5. For example, knight takes d5 is even possible here, mating like this, the bishop taking away the h7 escape square. Yes, it's totally horrendous. If we look at that again, in this position, if rook h7, that's pretty desperate. White could even take on c7 and play like this with queen e4, threatening the rook and queen e6 mate again. So the rook would be dropping. That's just huge and disastrous for black. So bishop b4, and now a really neat move actually in circumstance to make g5 even more powerful. Can you guess what Jobava played here? If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, really quite a cute move. Okay, king e2, just connecting rooks, not placing the king necessarily on the queen side, just keeping it in the center. It looks safe enough. Hello, hello, the rooks say to each other. Okay, so g5 was also pretty strong, of course, as you might expect, rather. This position is pretty unpleasant for black. White can get huge pressure on that g file, and yeah, a big advantage anyway. But this is even better. So king e7, trying to get the king away from that glare of the queen. If knight bd7 instead, g5, and then bishop takes c7 check, wins the queen, black queen, for not much. So king e7, g5, hg, hg, knight fd7. Now the queen's got a responsibility for the rook, so guess what white played in this position? A really cute move again. If I give you 5 seconds to pause video, what would you play here? Okay, bishop takes c7. Yep, it's only the queen holding the rook, so semi-loose piece there, that rook. Black gave up the exchange there. It's pretty diabolical, this position. So gave up the rook. Bishop takes, took a pawn here. Rook b1 hitting b7. b5, bishop takes g6. Yes, it's all over bar the shouting here. Combining on f7 now. Here, a neat move was played. Another nice tactical blast here. White's playing this position. What would you play here? I'll give you 5 seconds to pause the video. Okay, clue, the rook's pretty loose. It's not protected by anything. How can you celebrate that? I hope you can see a key forcing move here. Okay, bang. Rook takes b8. So that check will scoop up that rook. So black didn't bother taking there, played e5. We have rook e8 check. Of course, it's all over. D takes e5 check. King c5 was played. If knight takes e5, there is actually queen f8 check, among other things. And just playing with the checks is pretty nice, winning the queen there. So king c5, sorry, after d takes, king c5. Rook c8 check, and black resign here. Yeah, the queen could be taken as one example. Okay, yeah, it shows a crushing kind of latent trap that exists if black plays too ambitiously, getting the bishop out of the pawn chain. And it seems entirely sensible to stop knight b5. But then, I guess, if we try and have some empathy for what happened, the move e6, doesn't that seem a bit counterintuitive when you can get the bishop out of the pawn chain? So, in a way, it's a kind of trap which seems plausible that it could occur in our own games. It seems more sensible to try and get the bishop out of the pawn chain instead of closing in. But it might be the case that even with a6, e6 is a sounder move, not to make that bishop a target. And that's the real beauty of chess. We can create generalizations, but in certain situations, maybe it's, you know, as this shows, the tactical liabilities of piece is also a concern to factor in, rather than a piece being bad necessarily at the opening. I know we're always taught, you know, the opening heuristics: control the center, get your pieces out and about active piece activity. But yeah, the peculiarities of this Jobava system call for extremely interesting play sometimes from both sides. And if you want to find out about more of the nuances of the Jobava system, check out that Kingscrusher TV/Jobava link. That's got a free video by Grandmaster Simon Williams, who explores a lot of spicy, interesting ideas. A great attacking player himself and a good friend of Jobava. So hope you check that out as well. Okay, thanks very much.